That I'll call to order the meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, November 13th. Look into the agenda. Are there any changes, additions? Seeing none, I'll move the agenda be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We have two delegations here this afternoon. First being the Canmore Public Library. Whoever is speaking. And thanks for being here today.
Just move that closer to myself. Mayor Borrowman and members of council, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. On a personal note, the last time the library had an opportunity to speak to council, I had to yield to others to speak as I had a nasty cold and had almost no voice. Unfortunately, today is no different.
Oh dear.
Again, I am fighting a cold, but I'm determined to speak anyway because I'm excited about what the library is doing and its plans for the next 5 years or so. And I want to share that excitement with you, because you're our biggest partner in this operation. You have, as part of your budget package for the library, a copy of our 5-year strategic...
Sorry, if I could just interrupt and get you to turn the mic over towards your face. Perfect.
Okay.
Is
that better?
These meetings are live streamed, so we want all the people at home to be able to hear what you're saying.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have, as part of your budget package for the library, a copy of our 5-year strategic plan for the years 2019 to 24. Our last strategic plan, 2013 to 18, dealt of necessity with the reality of a physical library move and all of the adjustments that needed to be made for that move. We as the library board are pleased with how that plan directed us to a place where the library now feels at home in Elevation Place, has become part of the team working in Elevation Place for the growth of our community, and is now reaching out into the community from that home. Our new strategic plan points in new directions and invites new opportunities. Our focus is on accessibility, inclusion, and collaboration. The vision stated on our strategic plan is to make the library a vibrant hub of the Canmore community. The board had some discussion around the word vibrant, as perhaps vibrant doesn't describe the picture that many people have of a library. But we embrace that word because that's how we picture our library in the next 5 years. The process of establishing the strategic plan involved information gathering, statistics and surveys, committee review and correlation of data, and a facilitated session for the board, which culminated in our plan completion. Some of the feedback that we received was kind of interesting. Here are some examples. Offer basic computer courses like how to use Skype or Gmail. Provide charging stations for devices in the library. Eliminate fees. Have a self-checkout. Take library services and programming outside the library via partnering with other organizations, developing mobile services, or by using technology. I hope you've had a chance to look at our strategic plan. I would just like to highlight some of the directions that are included in that plan, our hope for results, and at this time of year, how that affects our budget plan for the upcoming years. The slides on the screen that show as I'm talking just have been chosen to illustrate to you the vitality of libraries within Alberta and later on within North America as well. That's just in case I get too boring, you have something else to look at. Canmore Library is a dynamic, welcoming, and engaging environment. We would like the library to be a place accessible to all people within our community. Our programs and services should be welcoming for any age group, any ethnic group, and particularly underserviced segments of our community. One of the barriers we would like to remove is the need to purchase a membership for the library. We would like all members of our community to be members of the public library. This is both a legislated and a philosophical concept for the board. Canmore Library offers a variety of excellent resources, services, and programs. By tapping into results of community input, as well as library best practices, which are set out by the province, provincial library organizations, we will continue to offer excellent programs inspiring literacy, curiosity, and creativity. As well, we hope to be able to make some resources available outside of the physical library. We hope to further our connections and our actions and better our resources for the French community, the Stoney Nakoda community, as well as continuing and expanding our outreach projects like the Folk Festival, the Market, the Books on the Bus, the Community Food and Friends Dinner, which we have already started our outreach with. The community embraces, uses, and has a high awareness of the Canmore Library. We feel that the library resources and services are not as well known as they might be, so we can foster community awareness by deepening an open, informed, and ongoing dialogue with our community. Did you know that libraries consistently rate as the most important municipal service, second only to police and fire services? Canmore Library exemplifies organizational excellence. This goal demonstrates our desire to be a responsible and accountable resource within the community. We appreciate that we are funded by tax dollars and want to be stable and yet adaptable in the face of change that comes. We wish to be open to new ideas, innovation, and strive for continuous improvement. Canmore Library is a successful partner with stakeholders, community, and regional organizations. This goal highlights our desire for collaboration with partners in our community. A list of stakeholders and partners is included at the end of our strategic plan and is now visible on the slides on the screen. We believe that the library will grow stronger through our collaboration with these partners, but we also believe that the community of Canmore will grow stronger through the library as we work in partnership together. These are the people that we are working with, and these are the people who have a stake in our success. I know that many of you will have questions to ask about our plans for the next 5 years, and I have tried to anticipate a couple of those questions. There will still be time at the end to answer those that I haven't anticipated. How will our budget be affected by our strategic plan? The first strategic tactic is to eliminate annual fees. It is our plan to remove this barrier to access, as we know from studies done that this does prove to be a barrier to people. Did you know that we are one of the few libraries in North America that still charges fees? Some of our library patrons actually go to Banff or to Calgary where they can get a free membership, and then they come and use the services of our library. This is getting around the fee barrier, but it certainly does not make our library accessible to all patrons, because all patrons can't do that, especially those who perhaps most need the accessibility. However, at the same time, we hope to use the implementation of free memberships as an opportunity. We would like to develop a donation stream and to increase both use and memberships. By rolling out changes to fees concurrently with a comprehensive marketing plan, the community will gain a deeper understanding of the library and its services while having an opportunity to donate directly towards the costs of programming and services. There is research that suggests use and membership increase when libraries don't charge annual fees. And this is a chart by numbers of our own library For 1 month in a year, we do not charge fees. And you can see the increase in membership on the chart shown on the wall. So anecdotally, we have experience of the fact in our own library that when fees are gone, memberships increase. When you look more closely at our budget, we have actually budgeted in a very conservative manner by eliminating fee revenue and showing no corresponding increase in donation, fine, or service revenue. Our intention will be to combine annual fee elimination with any reasonable fee or donation revenue implementation. The library has a policy that dictates operation surplus flow into the subsequent year's operating funds, allowing the town's tax support to decrease with any positive income effects that occur as a result of annual fee elimination. We anticipate that this will be a project that begins partway through 2019 and will take several months to fully implement. And that will be because we hope to establish a very strong marketing plan before we go into. We'd like to combine the fee elimination with the marketing plan. Accessibility barriers are not just financial in nature, and as I mentioned earlier, we're also committed to ensuring that physical, cultural, and language barriers, among others, are part of our service plan. And some of our programs have already begun to breach some of those barriers. Organizational excellence was also a focus in the board's strategic planning exercise. We have received feedback and believe ourselves that the library, as a key municipal service funded primarily by taxpayers, has an obligation to remain responsive and progressive in our ability to deliver the best in programming and services within our capacity. We committed to excellence in the following principles: operational management, financial, human, and compliance, relationships within and with partners in the community, stable and consistent funding, strategic thinking, and ethical principles. Through our committee work, we are in various stages of planning on projects that are guided by these principles. We have a board development committee who has actively recruited board members who bring relevant skills to the board, enhancing the library's ability to meet or exceed its goals. We have developed a board orientation for new members and encourage and help to support expert advisors where needed. We have a strategic planning committee that sets the agenda for specific planning projects and leads both the shorter projects as well as the 5-year planning cycle. The strategic planning committee is tasked with the planning around annual fee elimination and corresponding revenue projects. We have a planning and policy committee which has updated all of the library's policies and created an annual review process that includes each policy as it comes due for review. We are also lucky enough to enjoy the excellent leadership of a professional librarian, Michelle Preston. She continues to develop a talented and committed group of staff and volunteers. She has successfully created a work environment that allows each member of the staff to grow professionally and add value to the services and programs offered by the library. Library staff members individually contribute programming ideas, feedback they receive from users, observations and requests that improve the library's offerings. Michelle maximizes our ability to remain progressive and inclusive. As we have achieved success in our organizational goals, we have continued to expand and fine-tune them. Another exciting step forward. We have begun working on an endowment fund.
Sorry, is there very much more? Because we have quite a full agenda.
Okay. Do you want me to quit? or should I go on?
Well, no, get to the, no, but
Okay.
move it along quickly.
I want you to hear this part. So another exciting step forward. We have begun working on an endowment fund for the library and will commit to raising funds for it along with our partners. This is a longer-term strategy, and it is very exciting to think about helping the library to stabilize its funding for the future. We know there are people and businesses in the community who want a way to contribute over the long haul and to make their contribution lasting. We are working to create a secure, stable facility for endowments and bequests. In closing, I'd just like to say that this is a wonderful time for the town of Canmore Library. We're in a beautiful facility that is well cared for and accessible. Our neighbors and their patrons in Elevation Place have expanded the library's appeal into segments of the community that may not have had awareness of the library in the past. We're working hard to extend our reach into the parts of our community that may still not be aware of or using the library, and we will strive to provide barrier-free access to all and remain a vibrant community hub. With the support of the town of Canmore, we will continue to add to the intellectual and creative wealth of our community. Sorry I went over time.
That's okay. Thanks very much. I don't know if there's members of council that have questions from the report. Councillor Sanford.
Yep. Thank you for your presentation. I had a question for you regarding the free membership. Mm-hmm. Do you have any indication of what sort of operational impact that might have on the staffing of the library? If you have a free membership, does that imply that you have a much greater workload? And how would we offset the operational impacts of that?
People would still have a membership. They would still come into the library, get a card, take a card. So in terms of operational effects that way, what we were hoping to do with a marketing plan is to, when we offer a free membership to somebody, we would also give them an opportunity to donate, but that would be laid out in the marketing plan so that it wouldn't just be kind of a, oh, here's a free membership, would you care to donate sort of picture. Is that the kind of question that you're interested in?
You showed us a slide of the uptake of memberships during the free membership periods.
Oh, the increased memberships.
So now you have more patrons, you have an increased membership, and your marketing plan is to bring more people into the use of the library. But that implies that there would be more workload as well. See. So there would be an operational impact. Has that been discussed or explored?
I'm going to turn that question over to Michelle. I think she can probably answer that better than I can.
We have anticipated that would increase staff workload, the processing, setting up of cards, etc. But having done it before, we have an idea of what that might look like, so the staff could be prepared ahead of time.
So I'm not just talking about the membership acquisition. I'm talking about if you have more members and they're using the services more, you're going to have more operational impact across the board. Yeah,
it could potentially increase quite significantly interlibrary loans, attendance at programs, just use of the library, our internet station. So it is likely to have an impact on all levels. Until we do it on an ongoing basis, however, it's hard to know. The snapshots that we've had on those 1 month basis do give us some idea, though, that it will increase.
And do you think your endowment idea would allow some operational funds to flow into that side of the operation as well?
We are just in the beginning processes of those discussions, so I don't think we can answer that question at the time. That might be the case, but we're just beginning those discussions, so I think it would be unfair to answer that at the time.
Okay, thank you.
That could be a hope, but.
Dr. Cotto, do you have? No. Just very, very briefly, I'm just curious if you could give a little detail on the outreach programs that you're considering for Stoney Nakoda.
Do you want to speak to that, Michelle?
Sure. So when we talked earlier this year, we did a little bit in regards to that. So summer reading programs, story times on a regular basis throughout the year for preschool and families. We are currently offering at the high school a writing program for the senior high, junior high students, and we're hoping to continue that as well. And there will be further opportunities as we implement each of those on a further and ongoing basis.
Great, thanks very much. I think there are no other questions from members of council, so thanks very much for being here and presenting. Thank you. And now we'll move to hear from our second delegation, Three Sisters Mountain Village, to talk about the public engagement process.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us some time on your agenda. My name is Michelle Gurney. I'm the lead on the communications engagement side for the Three Sisters Mountain Village team. With me, I should point out a few other key people today. We've got Jen Giesbrecht, and she'll be talking you through some elements of the ASP process update. We've got David Taylor here today, who is the president of Three Sisters Mountain Village. We've also got Bruce Marpole, who is my colleague in communications and who's been out doing all of the engagement sessions, along with Jessica Carpat, who's our lead planner. So before we get started, I just want you to think about the last best conversation you had. Just think about it for a second. And I want you to think about, why was that conversation so good? So was it because you had the chance to feel heard? Was it because you learned something? You heard a new perspective? You heard some great questions? You felt a connection to people? We had some really great conversations through the engagement process that we've just initiated. We're not done, the first stage of engagement, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those conversations in a few minutes. So why are we here? On October 2nd, you approved the terms of reference for the Three Sisters ASP, and at that time we talked about the public engagement process that we were going to initiate, and that we were going to go out and get feedback specifically on the vision and principles. And so we also committed at that time that we would come back and give you more regular updates on some of the things that we were hearing out in the community. So coming out of the last 2017 Resort Center ASP amendment, the one thing that we heard really loud and clear from council is that we needed to do a better job of articulating the vision and principles for the Three Sisters Mountain Village area. When you think about the fact that that's 80% of the developable land that's left in Canmore, there was a need for people to really understand what that was going to look and feel like and how it would contribute to the fabric of the community. So that's what we've been doing over the last little while, is working to refine the vision and principles and create more clarity so that the people in the community could understand them. One of the ways we did that, and we do have some handouts for you that we'll give to you at the end of the session, is we broke the vision and principles for each of the areas down into 5 themes or principles that you can see on this slide. So we articulated the vision for both Three Sisters Mountain Village and also for Smith Creek, but we also broke those down into what that means in terms of being inclusive, what it means in terms of building upon a sense of place, what it means in terms of the future economy, what it means in terms of design and the best practices that we would be considering there, and what it means in terms of being safe. How do you need to think about steep creeks or wildlife corridors, or it's a good example. So one of the things that we also had to really think about there after we refined that vision and principles was, how do we embark on a consultation or engagement effort that would be different? Because this project has done a lot of consultation and engagement work in the past, and we wanted to build upon it. But what we carefully considered was the difference between consultation and engagement. And when you think about those purest definitions, you think about consultation as the chance to go get input. Whereas you think about engagement, and it's about an invitation to people to engage in a more meaningful way that leads to more constructive dialogues. And so that was the one thing that really drove our strategy for putting the new communications and engagement plan together for Three Sisters. And I'll talk about some of the things we learned about that in a few minutes. One of the things that we really wanted to build upon as well was we needed to have more input from a broader, a more diverse community. So what did we actually do? I'll just talk you through the different elements of the first stage of the communications plan right now, because that's what we're here to share. In about 2 months, we'll come back and share the next plan for our later stage of engagement as we continue on the process to refine and develop the ASP. So the first thing that we did was identify that we wanted to do pop-ups. And what pop-ups allow for is space for conversations to happen. And we wanted to have those pop-ups in the places that people were already. We wanted to make it really easy for people to come and provide input on the Three Sisters Mountain Village vision and principles. And so we hosted those pop-ups that spanned a range of community interests and groups. And we held one at the Canmore Mountain Market, which I'll say allowed for probably the most conversations to happen. We had about 80 to 100 people join us at that group. It was the first one, and we found that we actually had to go out and really invite people to come and talk to us. They weren't looking for us so much at that venue. We held one at Canmore Safeway on a Saturday afternoon, which led to about 40 conversations at that venue. We hosted a pop-up at the Bow Valley Chamber of Commerce Business Excellence Award. There was a lot of people there, about 130 people, but about 15 to 20 quality conversations that happened at that specific venue. We hosted an event, or a pop-up, forgive me, at Elevation Place, which allowed for some lengthier conversations, was one of the things we noted there. We had about 40 locals come and talk to us there. We were a supporter and sponsor of the Thrive Health and Wellness Festival, so we had about 25 conversations that happened there. And next, this weekend we'll be at the Artisan Market this Saturday. And then what we'll do later, end of November, early December, is we're going to invite those community advisory group members to come and re-engage with us, and we're going to give them a more fulsome update on where we're at and allow for, again, that feedback and input on the refined vision and principles that we have now. One of the other things we did was this additional outreach. So in addition to the pop-ups where they were more informal conversations where we learned a lot about what people were thinking, these were sessions where we had a formal presentation. So we were at Rotary on October 3rd. Jessica Carpat gave that presentation. That was the next day following the terms of reference approval. And so there was about 40 people there and some really good conversations that happened after that session. Our president, David Taylor, presented at BODA a quick overview to let people know that the engagement activities were happening and invite people to come and share their points of view so that we could consider all of them. That happened at BODA. We also, about 2 weeks ago, hosted a session at the Senior Center as part of their seniors learning. And that was actually a 3-hour session where we presented, and they had so many great questions. We stayed right up until the end to be able to talk about some of the things that they wanted to talk about. And as I said, both these pop-ups and outreach really led to those great conversations where we heard incredible questions. We had the opportunity to understand the hopes and fears of the community, and really what emerged was people really wanted to talk about broader community issues and maybe how Three Sisters could help serve or support some of those broader issues, recognizing you can't be a solution for all of those challenges. So it was great. A really good opportunity for people to share their thinking and for us to learn more about what was really important to them or meaningful or what they had questions about to aid in our communication planning as we go forward. The other thing that we did as part of our communication strategy is we wanted to create more approachable, easier to understand collateral materials. And so the draft vision and principles document, which you'll get afterward, really does break the overall vision into the visions for each of the areas and outlines those principles that I mentioned that are so important We also created, well, we share a map of the area for context, and that became really, really important and valuable as we went through these sessions, because we needed to know exactly where people were talking about when they wanted to provide input. We broke down the area structure planning process using an analogy about flight so that people could understand what are we talking about now and that we're just talking about the vision. Because what we find is people really want to get into land use and have some of those deeper conversations about the specific aspects of the planning for the area, and that's really where we're not there yet. And so we wanted to help them understand when their opportunity to have those conversations would happen. We had a newsletter sign-up sheet that we always had with us, and we also had a feedback form where we asked people, what would you like to do more of in Three Sisters? Thanks, Jen. The other thing we did is we revisited our website. If you're familiar with our website, you know that we often use it mostly for a sales tool. And what we decided to do is really shift out the messaging on there and move from selling property to promoting the education, providing more education on what was going on right now and opportunities for input and to ask questions. So, if you weren't at our pop-ups, you could provide input through the website. Or if you weren't there, you could get on our Facebook page. So we wanted to make that front and center. We didn't want it to be difficult to find for people. It needed to be easy to access. The other thing we did there was we wrote a number of blogs on topics that we felt would be really important to people. Like, what does health and wellness tourism really look like? What do we need to think about for wildlife corridors, where we have our Golder expert doing a Q&A there? ASP 101 was another topic, and we have another topic there where we featured BODA talking about the barriers and benefits to future development. So we wanted to, again, in all these instances, lay out different perspectives because we know there are so many. We promoted these outreach activities through our Facebook page, through our email newsletter, and I think in your presentation materials it says we have about 900 subscribers. We have 955 now. We find every time we go to an engagement, people are like, yeah, sign me up. I want more information about this. People really want to become educated, and that's what's exciting to us, is to have that opportunity to provide more information. That's going out every 2 weeks. We advertised all these engagements in the Rocky Mountain Outlook and on community calendars as well. So mostly what you might want to be interested in is, what do we actually hear? And I want to caution you before I throw this slide up and start talking about it, that this is not themes. This is not like themes and data analysis we haven't coded all this data yet. These are glimpses or examples of things we heard. My intent is not to say this is everything we heard. You have that full report, and in that report we gave you an unfiltered document that shows every comment that we heard. And as I said, we had about 240 conversations. Some of those conversations were a minute long, and as Jen can attest, some of them were 20 minutes long, depending on what people wanted to know and talk about. And that was why the pop-up approach was really successful, I think, as we've moved through this. So 240 people in those conversations, 170 in the audience for presentations. What did we heard? We heard a lot of people talking about wildlife. And when they were talking about wildlife, they were talking about the need for responsible development. They were talking about the need for signage and more education around how we should be using our corridors. That's what I mean by we heard a lot of community issues kind of with the spotlight on them in these engagements. When people were talking about affordability, some of the things they were talking about is the need for diversity of housing types. All right, and part-time homeowners and how that was a concern for them in terms of community building. When they talked about transportation, it was largely different points of view on ways for connecting Three Sisters to downtown, ways to alleviate congestion, some of those bigger congestion concerns. When they were talking about community spaces, there was lots of excitement around the need for new pathways and what those could lead to in terms of connecting people, social spaces, greater walkability, desires around indoor recreation facilities. These were all things that bubbled up. Commercial spaces, and this is probably the area where I think there's an opportunity for broader communication or community dialogue around what economic diversification in commercial spaces mean in Canmore, because the range of things we heard here got really interesting, and that's where you heard people talking about satellite education, complementary services to downtown, don't compete with downtown. Some people just wanted shops and services that would help them with their day-to-day lives up there, bigger opportunities for health and wellness facilities up there. Those were all of the types of things we heard. When we talk about undermining, the things we heard about there were what were the risks, what are the fears around developing on property that has some undermining implications, and mostly what are the liabilities if something were to happen. So that's a really quick overview. As I mentioned, you do have that report. We're happy to take questions about some of the things you've seen there. And with that, I'll just hand things over to Jen, who's going to talk a little bit more about the ASP process and how that will be informed.
Good afternoon. My name is Jen Giesbrecht, and I'm a planner on the Three Sisters planning team. I'm here to give you an update on the work that the planning team has been doing on the area structure plan. In March of 2018, we met with senior staff from each town department to discuss the overall vision and guiding principles for the ASP. The vision and principles that we are currently gathering feedback on were developed based on our preliminary discussions with town administration. Currently, we are working on the land use concept for Three Sisters Village. At the ASP stage, a land use concept shows what general land uses go in which location and includes a high-level mobility network. In June, we hosted a 2-day workshop with approximately 15 members of town administration from all different departments, including planning, engineering, parks, recreation, and municipal services. The purpose of the workshop was to understand the town's key goals, priorities, and concerns for Three Sisters Village, and to get feedback on the vision and principles. At the workshop, we also did an interactive mapping exercise where town staff used foam blocks of different colors to create a series of land use concepts. Since the workshop in June, the TSMV planning team has been analyzing the concepts developed at the workshop to inform the creation of our working land use concept. Our technical analysis work and land use concept refinement is ongoing. In mid-October, we had a follow-up meeting with the town staff that attended the workshop in June to report back the results of the workshop and show them how their feedback was used. As part of the follow-up meeting, we showed administration our working concept. We're referring to it as the hybrid concept, and discussed what staff did not like, and what they felt was missing. Our next steps will be to refine the vision and principles and the land use concept based on the feedback received during engagement from the follow-up workshop meeting with the town and further technical analysis. We will also be having conversations with stakeholders related to specific technical components of the area structure plan. For example, we met with Rome Transit a few weeks ago to discuss their general goals and objectives in the long term, as well as their operational requirements. This feedback will help us ensure Three Sisters Village is designed for efficient transit. We intend to meet with these types of stakeholders at this stage in the process to inform policy development moving forward. We are hoping to come back to Committee of a Whole in 2 months to provide Council with an update on ASP progress. We're really excited about the project and how it's been going so far. So in the spirit of our engagement, we wanted to keep our presentation relatively short to allow time for questions and discussions. The TSMV is available for any questions that you may have on this second milestone of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the presentation. Now we'll jump in. Okay, great. Firstly, just to your opening question, when was the last best conversation that I had? It was probably yesterday morning with you.
Thank you.
Because we had a really great exchange of information. You know, I was able to understand a bit more about what you've been doing and what Three Sisters planning is looking like. So that was a really good conversation, and thanks for that. So you touched on just now how the feedback would inform the next stage of the process. Can you elaborate on that in any way, or?
So what we'll be doing with the feedback is we'll take the feedback. So what we've given you is preliminary data, which there's always a slight hesitation to give out preliminary data because it can create perceptions of what all the data is going to say. So a next step for us is to finish off this round of engagement. We'll take the data, we'll properly code it, group it into themes, and then what we'll do is we'll actually create a bit of a chart and table that shows people, here's the inputs, and here's how it will be considered in the ASP policy. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, we're slowly moving through this, so I appreciate that it's not all cast in concrete. You noted on page 2 of your report what we've heard. that you heard from the community that TSMB needs to better articulate the vision for its developable land. And what I'm hearing is that you're still in the process of imagining what that vision might be and not quite ready to articulate to the community.
It's a good question, John. So what we've got is the draft vision and principles that are out in the community for consideration. We're hearing people's input related to those vision and principles. The next step for us will be to refine the vision and principles based on what we're hearing. And then we'll make sure that that's clear for everybody through our internal processes, and then we'll be providing that back through the planning process.
I could add one more thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with regards to how the vision and principles feedback will be used, the intent of having vision and principles is ultimately to guide what is contained within the ASP policy document. So once we've revised the vision and principles per the feedback that we've been hearing through engagement, our next step will be to ensure that all of our planning policies and everything that we do moving forward is aligned with those vision and principles.
Great, thank you. So I was interested to read all of the many comments, and thanks for putting it all in here. There were certainly some outliers. Like, where was it? Somebody suggested a coffee shop near the waterfall. Thinking, not even sure which waterfall they want a coffee shop at. But, you know, thinking, all the time thinking. But in your sense, from the many conversations you've had, and this is something we talk about quite a bit here, do you have a sense that people in the community really understand what it means when they talk about protecting the wildlife in the corridors, and how that really requires us not to go into the corridors? What was your sense of how people were being informed in that perspective?
It's a really good question. I'm just thinking about the best way to answer it. So for us, we need to hear about how important wildlife corridors are to people and what they expect of them when it comes to the development. Okay, so that's where we need input. But what we heard a lot about was how people are interacting with the corridor, if that's what you mean. And so what it led us to, one of our insights, is that there is an opportunity to provide, there's a communications opportunity around corridor, if that's what you're asking me. It's a little bit out of scope for I think what we have here, but when you talk to people, there's not a great understanding of the barriers on a corridor and what it means. Like, a corridor means that's for the wildlife. And so what we heard a lot of people talking about is the corridor needs to be set for development. And some people would say, but that means no development there. I would like to use that, continue to use that space. So there's definitely an opportunity for greater education around corridors and what they mean and how they need to be used and protected for the love of wildlife.
Yeah. So
do you want to add anything to that?
So I think through the chair, I think there's a tension between what we're hearing in the public. I think there's a tension between people really like living and seeing wildlife in the community, and the need to set aside areas for wildlife to move safely and to ensure that human use is managed within the corridor. I think that managing that tension, living next to wildlife, not coexisting with wildlife, is going to be a conversation that will need to be had further in the community.
Yeah, and I think that was sort of the thrust of where I was going, was in the engagement that you're planning over the next couple of months at least. Do you have thoughts about how you could really drill down into that, which is an ongoing part of the puzzle here, is that conflict between recreation and conservation? It'd be nice to have a little bit better understanding, or have the community, I suppose, have a bit better understanding of the inherent conflict between conservation of the corridors and recreation within our valley. So is that something that you would be able to pull out a bit?
Sure.
So this is something that we hear about a lot. We're very aware of the other work that's been going on in the valley, in particular the Roundtable on Human-Wildlife Coexistence. We're very aware of the contents of that report, and ultimately we're really looking to build on that conversation moving forward. What that looks like, I would defer to Michelle on that, but it's a consideration, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I suppose we'll be sort of moving forward in concert, because we will be starting to talk about implementation of some of the recommendations in that report through the early part of next year, and as part of the budget process right now. So if Three Sisters is having the same sort of community engagement, I think that'd be helpful if we're sort of all talking from the same page on that.
It's an excellent point, John, and I think what we've discovered, and I think anybody who does a lot of engagement work like the town of Canmore does, is sometimes when you engage on one thing, you learn a lot about something else. And what we need to do is make sure that the things that we learned and heard are shared with other stakeholder groups who are leading on these types of topic areas. And so we'll need to make sure that we're passing along things we heard to the roundtable as well in some of the other areas. Is there value in some of the data we gathered for the town's own economic development folks? And how can we be part of those proactive conversations that help people identify priorities or learning opportunities, or so we want to be part of that dialogue for sure. We have to be really mindful about where we choose to lead or where we choose to support from a communications perspective.
Great. I have a number of other questions I'm planning to ask, but others can also jump in. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. The report was very interesting, and some of the comments were quite extreme in one end or the other. I'm wondering how you take such a diversity of input and focus it to a point that works for the community and that works for the developer. I'm not sure what criteria you use to determine where the center is, or where you want to bring it together. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I'm going to hand that over to Jen.
Okay. It's probably a planning-related question, right?
Harder questions go to Jen.
No, this is a great question. Thank you. So typically how it works when we do these types of engagements is we document all of the feedback that we receive. And as Michelle indicated, we code at it. We look at key themes. We see where everyone's priorities are, and as you've indicated, sometimes there's things that land on the extreme. So then what we have to do is we have to look at the other inputs that go into an area structure plan. So these would be things like the town's guiding policies and principles, their technical requirements, there's constraints on the site, we have to look at those, we have to look at the financial viability of what we're doing. And so ultimately we make a decision on the priorities for balancing all of these various inputs. And what we can commit to do is, should there be an instance where perhaps we've received some feedback that we can't use, we always commit to explaining why that is.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Councillor Comfort.
Actually, that last thing you said was actually my my question. Was I think you must have discovered as you went through the data that there's a lot of things that people don't know or understand. So they don't really know what an area structure plan is, or how it can be changed, or how it's relevant to, say, the land use bylaw. And so it seems to me Three Sisters could help themselves by providing an educational component. And I really do have to applaud you for just presenting the raw data, because some of it made me gulp, so I can't imagine what it did for you guys. I think your best bet, if you're talking to the community, is not to try to dissemble, not to say, yes, we can do everything that you want, we won't have any of this, and there will be lots of that, but to just be really honest about that, and then just what you said, to explain why you can or can't, or and how that decision was made, but that everybody feels that they were heard, and it's a community endeavor. It's not something that comes in from the outside and lands, and then everybody that was involved disappears. It really becomes part of the community. That's what I'd like to see anyway. And thank you for your work.
So one of the things that really jumped out when I was looking at your report, particularly on the first page of what we heard, the key discussion topics, was the obvious conflict in the community between, when it comes to the types of commercial retail activity that might happen in Three Sisters. So a number of people apparently felt that they'd like to see restaurants, grocery, retail stores in the Three Sisters, and others clearly indicated they don't want to see commercial spaces up there that are competing with the downtown. So how are you going to go about sort of resolving that confusion in your engagement, I should say? And if you don't know yet, that's okay. Sure. You want to just come to the front? Thanks very much. Thanks, David.
With the diversity of responses and questions and information we've received, we're not going to make everybody happy. There's going to be certain topics that we cannot make this side happy with this side. That's a given, and we have to do as Jen has suggested, make sure we explain why to the best of our ability, and there will be certain groups who just won't accept our explanation. So, you know, we're going to do the best we can. With regards to your question about what should be in the Three Sisters area, and you know, in the commerce side of things, there's going to be 10,000 people, 6,000 people, some number, which the number of established commercial sites in the downtown core will not be able to fulfill their requirements over time. And so there's going to have to be some more grocery stores. There's going to have to be some more competing things that are going to go on in the Three Sisters area just to be able to make the life standards of what the people up there are going to want. And it won't be 3 Mariettas or 3 Safeways or 3 other things. There will be restaurants and stores that will have diversity in it. So we're fully expecting to have people come from the downtown core up to Three Sisters. And we're still expecting people from the Three Sisters area to come to the downtown core. And there will be that mix of flow back and forth. And that's one of the key things we have to do, is make sure we can allow for transportation back and forth. Does that answer your question?
Not exactly, but I appreciate your perspective. I recognize exactly what you've said, that we're never going to be able to find a situation where everybody's happy. It was more, the thrust of the curiosity I have is around how Three Sisters might engage with, through the engagement, help people think about that very fact. You know, there has to be commercial up there. It doesn't necessarily have to compete to the detriment of the downtown core, and to some extent, it really is. I guess it's more than engagement. It's more than an engagement. And the town presumably will be involved in some of that in the future when ASP comes forward. But since you're doing such a good job of engaging with the community this time, I don't know. I was just curious if you had any thoughts about how you might draw that conflict out in the public voice.
Or we're hoping it's not a conflict. We're hoping it's a discussion like we've had.
No, the impression in some people's mind that there's a conflict there.
But it's going to have to be discussion, and it's going to have to be a continuation of what we're doing today. And I think this restart that we've had, I think we're doing a better job of communicating with the town and administration, and I think we're also doing a better job of talking and conversing with the town people. And we're getting more people who are the silent majority, that's my term, of the majority of the people that are in between the two very, very vocal opposing sides. And we're hearing what they have to say. And they're the ones who I think in the end are going to be the people who we have to make understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it.
Thank you. If I can add to that, with where we're at the engagement line, what is this? This is really leading to insights for us. And I can assure you this is something that we're thinking a lot about and beginning to have conversations about is, what do these tensions, as Jessica called them, mean? And so I don't have an answer for you right now, but I think when we come back in our 2 months to lay out our next stage of engagement, that's something we'll be able to talk a little bit more about. We're just sort of sitting with it right now, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Great. So just a couple of other thoughts or suggestions, I suppose, in the engagement that you'll be doing between now and when the ASP is brought forward is there's a perception, again, I think it's a perception that much of the congestion that we're experiencing in the downtown core is directly related to growth and development in the other parts of the community, which certainly is a factor, but I think a big part of the congestion that we're experiencing is also directly related to the growing number of people from the city that are coming out to visit. So just as part of the engagement process, helping people analyze what's actually the root of the congestion downtown. I'm just throwing this out for possible topics in your engagement. And there was one other similar sort of a part of the conversation that I don't think very many people are fully understanding, which is around economic diversification, and the town's been talking quite a bit about that for the last year or more. And I think we could do a better job of talking about that in the community. We're doing a good job, but clearly there's still not certainty when it comes to what we mean when we talk about economic diversification and what Three Sisters' role might be in that diversification. Just food for thought.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing what you're saying, because I think what you'd like us to think more about as we enter the next stage of planning for the engagement is when we think about some of the different points of view or the different information people have about the cause and effect of certain things, is there anything we can do to support a broader conversation that helps people become better educated on those things? Is that what you're saying?
That's
okay.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. So that's definitely on our list of things. And I will say something, because everybody plans their communications in different ways. And some people like to say, here's what the total engagement plan looks like. And we purposefully have not done that because of the very thing that you're raising, Mayor Borrowman, is we learned things in the first stage of the engagement that could lead us to reconsider the next stage. And so that's how we're approaching this plan, is we really wanted to be flexible in terms of what's next. And these things that have, these issues or tensions that have emerged are really important and powerful thought starters for us as we consider what's the right way to continue engagement on this project.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Borrowman, I think you've had some really good conversations or thoughts about topic areas that are really tensions in the community. And some of those specifically regarding congestion and downtown parking and other mobility shifts that the town is really seriously considering moving towards for a number of sustainability and transportation reasons, infrastructure reasons as well. And I think these are conversations that we could both work together on, because some of these are Three Sisters aligning with a larger mobility strategy with the town of Canmore, and some of these are being triggered because of the resort conversation. So there's a holistic, there's almost like a number of strategies going on that the entire public needs to be informed on, not only by the town of Canmore, but maybe involved with Three Sisters, or maybe vice versa. And so there's a lot of opportunities there that we could explore conversations with the town administration and with yourselves on.
Great, thank you. Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation. And I think, well, really good information and all that, but I think this is a real important opportunity, and we all realize that. Just wondering about best practices in community design. I know that you're going to bring a lot of that up. Some of my thoughts are density, retail, hotels, recreation concepts are top of my list. We have a recreation master plan. Just wondering specifically if you had any ideas that could inform the process on a recreation standpoint.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Seeley. I think it's a good one, and it's one we've been hearing a lot in the community. Currently, our land use concept is still undergoing technical analysis, so the actual detail around what this looks like will be coming at a later stage. So when we come back next time, we're hoping to have more details for you about specifically what we're thinking for those specific aspects.
Great, thank you.
So at this time, we're really just talking about the engagement that you've done and hearing a bit about the engagement that's coming in the near future. We're not going to be, I mean, there's no conversation right now about when the process for the ASP post-engagement, or is there any sort of information about what we can expect?
So in about 2 months, we'll come back and we'll provide more details on the plan for the engagement for the next stage around the ASP. Is there anything you want to add to that?
And when we come back next time, we'll also be providing you with more specific details about the contents of the ASP.
Okay, yeah, I think that's what I was curious about.
Yes.
Great. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just further to Councillor Seeley's question about recreation, in these conversations and deliberations that you're having about the ASP itself, are you using the town's reference documents like the Recreation Master Plan, the Cultural Master Plan, the Commercial Needs Study, all those? Is there
absolutely
regard for that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So typically how we would go about doing a plan like this one is we not only engage the community and consider the input that we're getting there, but we also look at all of the town's guiding documents and policies. So the Recreation Master Plan is a really good example. That's something that we refer to a lot.
Okay. And as you move forward, the conversation about 80% of undeveloped land is in the Three Sisters. Is that correct? It's stated in your document. So ultimately, the kinds of things that the community as a whole needs would be considered to be part of the Three Sisters build-out as well. Is that something that you're considering? Because as the ASP moves forward, are we talking about the needs of the community as the whole might have to be located in Three Sisters because that's where our developable land is?
I think that's certainly a consideration. I will say that our planning team also is aware that we need to be balancing the landowners' goals with the solving problems of the town. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we're certainly considering the fact that this is a significant aspect of developable land. However, we also can't solve all of the challenges. We can work with the town to come to solutions.
Yeah, so for example, the Canmore Recreation Center is in the large subdivision, but we don't consider it being in the large subdivision. We consider it as being part of the town of Canmore, right? So just because the assets are spread around the community, we don't consider them to be associated with that community in particular.
Sure,
right?
Yep, that would be the case.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, we're, through the chair to Councillor Sanford, for instance, we are in conversation with the town with regards to a fire hall, which would serve the community. So yes, those items are being considered within the area structure plan. And other community needs that are identified would be looked at through the area structure plan process, through either circulation to school boards or to other material circulation bodies. Those needs would be looked at through the area structure plan process.
And they would essentially be something on the rec master plan that benefits the whole community, that sort of thing. Right, okay, great, thank you.
Just kind of as a final curiosity, so is there an expectation that you'd carry on or continue to engage in this way and this level of engagement with the community post ASP coming to the town? Would you see an engagement process like this continuing, or only taking Three Sisters up to the point of finalizing the ASP? And then, do you know where I'm going with this?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
So once the ASP is presented to the town, is the engagement from Three Sisters that you've been doing, is that done? Or would Three Sisters continue to want to engage with the community as the ASP is moving through the process at the town?
There's definitely a milestone. There's an engagement process around the draft ASP, if that's what you're asking about. So do you mean beyond that?
Yeah, beyond that.
That's a question that I'm actually not able to answer. I'm going to have to
Maybe there is no answer yet, but you don't have to commit to anything today.
So
Just curious.
throughout the area structure plan, we will be engaging, and at the time that council makes a decision on the ASP, I would consider that we would continue to engage through other Three Sisters work that we would be doing in the community. After area structure plan approval, there are several planning processes that need to occur after area structure plan. So should we get approval from council, there would be ongoing work that we would be engaging in the community with at different planning levels and going through different levels of detail after area structure plan. So I'd say, yes, we would be continuing on the engagement throughout.
Great, thanks for that. And if there aren't any other questions, thanks very much for being here today to present. I really have to commend Three Sisters and your group for the work you've been doing. It's, I think it's really important if we're going to find success in this next ASP discussions that the community has been heard from. To sort of flesh out what we've talked about here at council in the past, what we're looking for in a future ASP, and it's also really important that you also hear from the community, which will inform the ASP. So thanks very much for the work you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Then I'll move on to the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of Tuesday, October the 9th. Are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Moving on to item D1, Human Use Management Review and Coexistence Update. Ms. Risling-Wynn.
Today seems like a really good day to come and chat with you guys about this. So.
Yeah, right.
I appreciate
that wasn't carefully planned out?
No, actually it wasn't. So good afternoon, Mayor Borman, members of council. I am here this afternoon to present an update to you all regarding the Human Use Management Review and Wildlife Coexistence work. As you know, there's a lot going on in the Valley related to these initiatives, especially since the release of the Coexistence report earlier in the spring. And this being one of Council's 6 strategic priorities, we really wanted to provide you with this brief update at this time. So I just wanted to lead with an acknowledgement that we are continuing to work with our strategic partners on implementing initiatives related to the Human Use Management Review and the Coexisting report. And of course, that includes the province and all their various ministries, the Friends of Kananaskis, WildSmart, the Alberta Conservation Association. So, and there are many more, obviously, that we're continuing to work with as well, but I just wanted to start by highlighting that. So again, in 2018, as in previous years, the town of Canmore removed Shepherdea from 28 acres throughout town in 2018. This is also a recommendation from the Coexisting report that natural attractants be removed from developed areas. So we did treat 28 acres in 2018. The map's obviously a little bit difficult for you guys to read, but the darker green is the area that was treated in 2018, and then the other areas were 2016 and 2017. And so this work involves identifying the female berry-producing Shepherdea plants, and then cutting those plants off at ground level and chipping the woody debris and spreading it throughout the forest. So also related to attractant management, you'll recall that in both 2016 and 2017, we offered a fruit tree replacement program. And in 2017, 26 trees were removed from town. And this subsidized program was not repeated in 2018, in part to control cost. But more importantly, significant efforts have been made over the past 3 years to raise awareness around this issue throughout the community. And because of this, we shifted the focus in 2018 to communication and education to encourage homeowners to take personal responsibility for their trees, whether that be to remove the tree or remove the attractant, so the fruit, and manage them so that their trees don't attract dangerous wildlife. And then throughout the month of August and into the fall, the town of Canmore pushed these messages on social media regarding attractant management. So we had information on the town of Canmore website. We had information on our 2 mobile signs, which you probably saw, and also through, as I said, our Facebook and other social media reach. So we've also taken steps by partnering with Alberta Environment and Parks to understand the extent of this issue within the community. And this is a piece that I received after my staff report was put in the agenda package, so you haven't seen it. But this was an inventory that Alberta Environment and Parks undertook with 3 university students. It took them a week to collect the data throughout town. And it does show the extent of fruit trees throughout the community. So there are the numbers. So we're looking at about 2,500 trees in total. It is separated by species. So there's cherry, crabapple, and mountain ash. And you can see that there's still a significant amount of work to be done in this area. And so, again, this is sort of hot off the presses information that we received from AEP. So we're working together with them to try and determine what the best strategy to move forward with addressing fruit trees throughout the community. With regards to fencing urban green spaces, this was also identified in the Coexisting Roundtable report. So the actual recommendation was remove attractants or exclude wildlife from accessing attractants, to exclude ungulates from grass playing fields. So again, through conversations with Alberta Environment and Parks and the Canadian Rockies Public School Board, we are considering looking at fencing on Centennial Park and LGMS. There has been an ongoing issue with elk on the green fields there, and Alberta Environment Parks has serious concerns about this recurring situation. And because the Coexisting report does recommend fencing urban green spaces, and the fact that this type of fencing has been done successfully in Jasper and Banff, we are considering fencing part of LGMS and Centennial. So this is conceptual only. This certainly is not set in stone. This is a working alignment that's being discussed with those two key stakeholders. So the fencing in red around Centennial would be Town of Canmore property. There is some existing fencing, that would be the fencing in green, that wouldn't necessarily need to be modified. And then the blue fencing is fencing that would be required on Canadian Rockies Public Schools land. The gates are also identified. The nice thing about separating the proposed fencing into two pods like this is it does maintain access along 6th Avenue right through Centennial Park, so we don't have to make any amendments or changes to the decorative gates or the paving stones at either entrance of the park, and it allows for people to be able to negotiate that without having to twist burleys around chicanes or open gates or that sort of thing. So again, this is just a proposed alignment, and we are carrying on conversations with Alberta Environment and Parks and Canadian Rockies Public Schools to further understand what this alignment may look like.
Can I just interrupt
Yeah.
for a second on that slide? So you mentioned that the existing fencing would likely be adequate, but my understanding of the proposed fencing it would be 7 or 8 feet tall or something?
About, yeah, 8 feet, between 7 and 8 feet.
Right, so is the existing fencing that height?
It's probably between 5 and 6 feet, and so it also sort of depends on where the fence is located as well, because so the fence along behind the houses here, it would be a really difficult place for elk to be able to navigate through that really hard surfaced area. So we wouldn't really expect them to be coming up and over at that location. So the thought would be that that fence would be adequate in height as is. And then similarly for the fencing around the roundhouse, it's also fenced along the front of the school. So, you know, now they're having to hop 2 fences to get in. So again, because of that, it's more than likely that we would expect that that fence would be adequate as is.
And you indicated that AEP is involved in this discussion?
Yes.
Yeah. In what context are they involved?
Well, they're certainly aware of the elk, and they get calls. They've had many calls this fall, both from concerned parents who have children at the school, but also from the school itself. So they understand where the herd is located and how many animals are in there and what their behavior is like, but also with respect to the best alignment with the fence. So I've talked to Jay Honeyman many times and sent different iterations of fence alignment to him, and we've been going back and forth on what potentially could be a solution.
And I know we'll be talking more about this before too long. I'm just, so for now, this is seen as a sort of a trial opportunity to see how fencing within the community might work?
I think so, yeah. I mean, there's certainly unknowns with respect to how elk will respond to having this part of town excluded to them. The intent would be to fence additional green space areas in the town in subsequent years, so Millennium and the playing fields at OLS and École Notre-Dame-de-Meaux. So it certainly will be a great opportunity for us to learn some lessons by fencing this part of town. And it's a higher priority area for Alberta Environment and Parks, so they'd certainly like to see us lead with this location.
It's higher priority for AEP because it's in the downtown core, or for other
and because of the students and the children,
students,
yeah.
Right.
And the location of the bus drop-off loop.
And I understand that there has been quite a bit of concern, at least amongst the staff at this school, around that potential conflict. But there must be similar concern up at OLS.
Yes, yeah, there definitely is, yeah.
Go ahead.
Could I just add one point that although this is something of a trial here, both the communities of Banff and Jasper have long had fences around their green spaces associated with the schools. So it's not an entirely new solution. And it's one that we're fairly confident, and especially AEP is quite confident, that is both necessary and prudent to put in place.
Sure, and it's definitely recommended by the Human-Wildlife Conflict Report. I guess I was a little curious about the dislocations being the first trial location as opposed to other obvious candidates.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's rationale behind that, Councillor Mr. Fark.
I can speak to that. So we did look at other locations. Specifically, Millennium Field was the other key location that we had looked at originally. It is adjacent to a habitat patch and is also a high conflict location. At the end of the day, we moved forward with this location at the request of AEP. So it is very difficult for them to respond to elk on the field when they are there, especially in the daytime. It's very difficult for them to push elk out of this location through a established community. And again, due to the ongoing presence of children there pretty much all of the time, it was felt that this was the priority location. So although we did consider other locations, we are doing this specifically at the request of AEP.
You know, and that's great. That's kind of detail I was looking for. Thank you. Sorry, carry on.
No worries. Thank you. Next, I'd like to speak really briefly about enforcement in 2018. So these are the statistics related to the human use and wildlife conflict issues for the year. You'll see that 74 tickets and 40 warnings were related to off-leash dogs. Additionally, 4 tickets related to wildlife attractants, and 3 of those were for improper storage, and one was for fruit trees. And then the last item is 4 warnings were issued related to wildlife attractants, and again, 2 were improper storage and 2 were related to fruit trees. So something to bear in mind, in particular around the wildlife attractant related enforcement stats, is that this is in the fall, really only. Obviously, our bylaw officers are looking at garbage storage throughout the year, and bird feeders in the spring when bird feeders are meant to be put away. But they're really doing a great job in helping us to try and educate the community around the fruit tree in particular issue. And then Alberta Environment and Parks also shared their enforcement stats with us. So these were their stats from the 1st of May until the 3rd of September. So you'll probably recall that Alberta Environment and Parks redeployed 2 of their conservation officers to the Bow Valley for that period of time. So these are the statistics that they provided. So 117 off-leash dog offenses, which was double what was written in 2017. 528 enforcement actions, and also up 103 from the same time the previous year, and then 42 violation tickets, so which they categorized as failure to obey a posted sign. So those are tickets related to people being in closed areas in wildlife corridors, so within the ministerial order area, where they do have the authority to give people tickets for not being on an official trail. And the other thing that AEP really wanted to highlight in their report as well was acknowledging that off-leash dogs are a serious issue for park users, for staff, and wildlife in the boat corridor. And I think they appreciated some solidarity with the Town of Canmore bylaw staff in terms of how challenging it is to address off-leash dogs.
Do you know offhand what the penalty is for when AEP enforces in their lands?
I don't. I think it's, well, I'd be guessing. Does anyone know? Yeah. So I just wanted to finish and talk briefly about our 2018 capital projects. So the first one was with respect to corridor signage. So the province is in the process of developing and installing signs to identify the South Canmore Wildlife Corridor, so on the south side of the valley. And we are working with them to deploy those signs, so that work is moving forward. And then the other capital project that was identified in 2018 was regarding trail density in the Palliser area. And due to delays regarding specifics around the Lower Silvertip Wildlife Corridor from the province, due to that missing direction, so to speak, we haven't proceeded with this work as of yet. And so it will be deferred until we have clarity from the province regarding that corridor and in the future. So that's all I have for you, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you very much. I've been kind of asking my questions as you went along, so
Yeah.
I have no other questions. Council? Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question for you about what actually triggers a fruit tree violation ticket. How do you get a ticket for a fruit tree violation?
So I'll answer that to the best of my ability, and if necessary, we can follow up with Greg Burt and Michael Orr regarding additional specifics if I missed something. But it needs to be, there needs to be documentation that a bear was in that tree on that particular property. So a photograph, a statement from an individual. So first of all, bear has to be in the tree and attracted to that fruit. And then there has to be a mechanism to allow us to positively identify both the property and the incident with the animal. And then at that point, they would have the grounds to issue a ticket.
Because you had mentioned that there was an inventory of fruit, and we call mountain ash a fruit-bearing tree. It's sort of in the gray area there, right? It's not exactly, but it can be an attractant?
Yes, yes.
So you said there were 2,500 trees and there was only issued 4 tickets from your side?
So that doesn't necessarily mean that there were only 4 bear incidents. Right. That would be situations where all of those pieces lined up, and therefore we were within our legal right to issue a ticket. There are definitely bears in other trees that go unseen. There are bears that are in trees that don't get reported. So I think we're moving in the right direction and really helping to raise awareness around the issue. And then there is that mechanism to do enforcement, but it does require some additional diligence in terms of the actual reporting and witnessing of a bear in that tree. So it's not that different from other enforcement related protocols where you can't just write a ticket after the fact because someone said so, right? So there has to be that documented trail.
There just seems to be a very big gap between public perception and the follow-up in terms of enforcement. So is there any consideration about how to tighten up that gap?
So we are going to be, as I said, looking at developing a strategy related to fruit trees. So what does enforcement look like moving forward? We do have a meeting scheduled in December to talk about these additional issues. So 2,500 trees is a lot of trees for sure. And not every one of those trees has proven to be a concern, obviously.
Right. Absolutely.
The higher priority areas are the ones adjacent to corridors and habitat patches that have had bears repeatedly come to visit those particular properties. So, there's some thought around, maybe we need to start there. So yes, there is high potential though, and I think having that fruit tree inventory is a really great key piece of information that we needed to have in order for us to understand the extent of the problem.
One thing that I've raised a number of times during new development is the construction and landscaping standards, which recommend what sort of vegetation to put in a new development. So it would be my guess that at the point of a new development is when you take the right fork in the road and not put in attractant style trees, anything that might be considered an attractant. Yeah. But in the document itself, it has very limited language about, discouraging as opposed to banning or, being strongly worded. So is there some consideration about looking at the language just in that section? Because we have a lot of information and knowledge about how to take the right fork in the road, not just to discourage or dissuade, but take the right fork in the road at the beginning of a development.
Right. Yeah, and I believe that engineering, so those landscaping standards sit in the engineering design guidelines in terms of specifics around recommended plant species. And so it does have a list of wild smart species to avoid and recommended plant species, as well as fire smart related species too. And the engineering department has done some work around the landscaping standards, but it isn't as strong as these shall not be. It's these are the recommended and these are the ones to avoid. I don't believe that the next iteration of the ENG design guidelines are going to contain any stronger language, but I can say this, that when the planning department reviews development permit applications that include landscaping plans for developments, we all scrutinize excuse me, the plant species list, and if we see those plant species on the landscaping plan, we would bring that to the attention of the developer and ask that they be removed and replaced with something else.
But could we not avoid even that conversation? If a developer has to make a plan, they're going to make the best plan or the easiest plan that's available to them. So if those things are not even a possibility, then they don't even have to consider it, just go on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And I really like what has happened around town, where we have a number of plant species, even behind this building at Elevation Place, that shows that you can have very attractive flowering plants that don't become an attractant later on in its life cycle. So, you know, I think we could really tighten that up just to avoid that gap, because we have a gap right now of knowledge and intent and action. So
yes,
and that would be a good place for you to get
comments
involved.
from over there.
Yes, just a couple of comments, and I appreciate that there's no easy solution to this. So the comments that I wanted to make is that the landscaping design guidelines are guidelines. So it would have to be a thou shalt not, would need to be some form of a bylaw as opposed to in the guidelines. And further, the guidelines don't apply to single-family residences. They're only for larger developments. So landscaping plans are not submitted for single-family residences. So that is another hurdle we'd have to get around.
And I'll just add to that. I think the challenge comes in, and Lori spoke to it a bit, when we look at fire smart and wildlife attractant and then native species. If we do a thou shalt not, the number of plants left is very minimal. So it gets really difficult. And so also trying to look at, Lori was talking about what's adjacent to a wildlife corridor, or I know Stu would say, with fire smarting, there's certain areas that are higher risk than others. But then it becomes this incredibly complex grid. And so it's not quite as easy as a don't ever plant this. If we look at all the things we want to restrict, we're left then with almost nothing. So there's some nuance there. Depending on the location and the size of the development, that is not insignificant.
Well, I've heard that almost nothing argument before, and we have a number of signed vegetation spaces around Canmore that prove that it's not almost nothing. So we can reconsider that, I think.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to get at is some of those spaces are considered are critiqued by one group because they're not native, and then another group critiques it because they are not fire safe. So they work well for one group, but not for all three, is the nuance I'm trying to suggest, right? So I don't disagree with you that we do have examples that can work. It's figuring out how and where to apply them that gets tricky.
Thank you.
Councillor Seeley.
I'm good.
You are? I am. Councillor Comfort.
So on the other side, and I sit on ERC, where Ms. Rislingwin is our admin liaison, and we've had some success in people voluntarily going, oh gee, there's a bear in my backyard every year at this time, feasting on the whatever it is. I think I'll take that out. And so a number of people have voluntarily removed some very attractive plants because they want to be good citizens as far as the wildlife goes. So I think, but that being said, I actually agree with you. And the most egregious example we had was, I believe there were some plantings in front of our civic buildings that were attractants and egregious attractants. They're gone now, but it just demonstrates the difficulty of the problem. So I think people need to take a little bit of responsibility themselves, to educate themselves, and to consult the town. We have great resources at the town to give you the information you need. So, oh, and that ticket is $115, a provincial ticket, dog off leash, $115.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions this time from members of council? Seeing none, thanks very much for your report today.
Thank you.
And we will now hear from Mr. Robbins on Organics Diversion. Something we've been looking forward to hearing about.
Good afternoon, Mayor Borman and Council. Yeah, as you said, I'm here to present to you what organics diversion could look like in Canmore, just to give you some information before budget decisions, capital budget decisions. So a little outline, we're going to look at why we came to this point of wanting to have an organics diversion program. We're going to look at what the program would look like that we're proposing, and then some alternatives that we looked at to get to the program. So to begin with the whys, there's three main drivers for this. First would be Council Strategic Initiative. So you're all probably fairly familiar with those. There's also our Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, which speaks to it, and then community expectations. So there have been lots of interest within the community, being presentations to council and letters and such, and probably drove some of the thinking on the strategic initiative for it being there. So to start with the first one, you're all probably very familiar with this. So it's a strategic initiative to move towards zero waste, and one of the plans was to explore organics diversion. So this is our exploration. The second one is our Environmental Sustainability Action Plan. So before I get into the graph, I'll give a little bit of background. So in the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, there is a goal for reducing the amount of waste that we send to landfill. And so there's targets for that. And so the way it's been calculated is the total waste that's sent to landfill in the community. So total waste being all the residential waste, commercial waste, construction and demolition waste, and then divide that by our population. And that comes to our per capita total waste landfilled. So the overall goal is to reduce the amount that goes to landfill, and we have 3 targets, and those 3 targets, kind of like the Rasta sort of motif on the graph there. It's pretty good. But so the 2015 target is 0.6 tons per capita. The 2020 target is 0.45 tons per capita, and the 2035 target would be 0.3 tons per capita. And so the white line on this is the trend that we've had of the waste in Canmore. Things to highlight are sort of in this zone here, we had the sort of the downturn and lack of construction in Canmore, where we did a great job of reaching our goal, but not a lot was being built. So there wasn't the concrete and asphalt going to landfill, or just heavy waste. And then 2014, we had the introduction of the Beyond Curbside program, and so our waste kind of flatlined. But as you can see, our 2017 numbers, we are above our goal. In 2017, we were at 0.65 tons per capita for our waste in Canmore. So that's where we're at right now. To get to these, to reach these targets, in 2012, we had the waste management strategy. And so the top 2 priorities on the waste management strategy were building a waste transfer station and materials recycling facility. So that was in 2014. Those were built with the construction of the Waste Management Center. And along with those was the implementation of the enhanced recycling program, so Beyond Curbside Recycling in Canmore. So our next thing is on the list, organic waste management. So how much organics is out there? And that's why in 2016 we did a waste management or waste characterization study. So we looked at all the waste in Canmore over a year and to see what it was made up of. We looked at a number, obviously the residential system, and then we looked at a limited commercial system. So in our residential system, from our waste characterization study, we're pretty typical of a Canadian community. 30% of our waste was food waste or organic waste. 40% is our recyclables, and then 30% is actual garbage that goes to landfill. And on the commercial side, at least half of the waste is food waste. Only 13% is actual garbage, and the rest is recyclables. So on the food waste side, that is approximately 1,000 metric tons of organic waste in the residential stream, and at least 1,500 tons of organic waste. And so I'd say at least because we only took a limited sample. And one of the samples was a hotel restaurant that was 75% organic waste coming out of there. And so in the blue, obviously, we have programs for all those recyclables. So if people want to divert that, they can. The one place we don't have a program is in organic waste or food waste. So if we were able to capture that 2,500 tons of organic food waste, this would be our projections on our ESAP goal. So if we look at our 2020 goal of 0.45 tons per capita, if we captured that whole amount of 2,500 tons, we would bring ourselves closer to our 2020 goal. We wouldn't get all the way there. And so there would be other things we'd need to do. We'd need to look at really getting people to use the existing recycle programs and really look at the diversion out at the Francis Cook landfill for construction and demolition. But it would definitely make a big step in bringing us closer to that goal. And the goal is all about environmental sustainability. And so there's sort of three main things that would help us on that road would be reducing the production of methane. So organic waste buried in the ground produces methane, which is 25 times worse than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. We're reducing our hauling distance. Currently we're hauling to Camrose, which is 800 kilometers round trip, and we'd be looking at hauling a lot closer, potentially 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers round trip. And then along with the construction project would be a solar project, and that would obviously create those benefits right there. And organic diversion does work. So there are a few regional examples of communities that have recently put in organics diversion programs. So Calgary, population of 2 million, they implemented it this year, and they found a 40% reduction in their residential landfill waste. And that's over the first year. Cochrane, it's been about, I think, 2 years of the program, and they have 26,000 people, and they're at 30% reduction of landfill waste. And then there's Airdrie, they've been doing it for about 4 years. And Langdon, I think it was the last couple of years, a population of 5,000, and they're also reducing their landfill waste by 20%. So the programs do work. So what you've all been waiting for, the plan. So we came up with a plan, did a lot of exploration, did a lot of research, looked at other communities that are doing this, looked at communities that are similar to Canmore with wildlife and mountainous regions, and came up with this plan that we're proposing in the budget this year. So we would look at implementing a full commercial program. That's where the majority of the waste is, or food waste is, and it's concentrated in smaller regions within town, so collection would be fairly easy. And we'd be able to control the product or the material that's coming out of there. We'd have direct control in the sense you open up the bin and you can see before you collect it what's in there, and if it's bad, you can work with the business to make their diversion better. Then we would look at doing sort of a pilot residential program. So put out 5 residential containers. So we would be looking at putting one at each of the recycling depots, so one at the Save-On Depot, one at the Boulder Crescent Depot, probably one in the South Canmore area, one in the Larch area, and then one across the river somewhere. We haven't identified the exact locations. And that would allow those who are really keen on the program, the residents, to have access to it in town. And then we would look at transferring material through Canmore. And so when I say transferring it, we would collect all the material, take it down to the Waste Management Center, stockpile it, and then when we have a large enough volume, we transfer it just like we transfer our landfill garbage. And there's a number of processors in the Calgary region who are interested in taking that material, and they would compost it. We did look into setting up some sort of facility. An example is Whistler. So in 2010, they did set up a composting facility for about 3,000 tons. Obviously, they have the same wildlife issues, so this was a fully enclosed composting facility. In 2010, it cost $7 million to construct, and that only accounted for the first part of the composting process. Because once they have their compost product, it needs to be cured, and just like us, Whistler doesn't have land, they send all their product to Squamish, and then it's cured there. So with the high capital cost and logistical difficulties, transferring it to processors that are already open for business in the Calgary region seemed like a feasible idea.
Do you mind if I interrupt with
Please
questions?
do, yes.
So I know from watching the news that Calgary has had to address the issue of residents not properly sorting their waste, so inappropriate things going into the organic stream. And it's easy for them to turn away a bin at the door. So are you going to be talking about how you'd manage that, or could you talk about how you'd manage that in a neighborhood bin?
Yeah, it's definitely. So that's the main risk for the program from a commercial side and from a residential side. So contamination and then participation. So it's to speak to contamination, that's why we'd be doing the full commercial to start with, is that, like I said before, you have direct control. You can refuse to take that material until it's cleaned up, and you can educate the person or the people that are directly producing that. For the residential side, that obviously is a bigger obstacle. The bins are 24/7 access, and they're anonymous access. And so along with this program we want to build a robust promotion and education. And then if the community looks like it's doing a really good job at creating a really clean stream in the residential bins, then that gives us the opportunity to improve from there. And if they aren't, then it means more work to educate people to do it properly. The processors do expect contamination on the flip side of it. It's a reality of food waste diversion is you're going to get plastic bags, you're going to get knives and forks and plates. And so the processors are expecting it. And I guess an example would be Banff. They have talked about how their residential collection can be quite contaminated. But when they take it to the processor around Calgary, the processors are saying, oh, this is way better than everyone else's. So the systems are built around the idea that there will be contamination. Obviously, the less, the better, but it does happen.
So the processors don't turn away streams. I mean, I know that in the recycling, if the recycling stream is badly contaminated, then it can be turned away at wherever it's going. But that doesn't happen.
No, the same could happen with the compost and recycling. So it would be our decision. An operator dumps a bin, residential bin. If it was bad enough, they would have to take that bin and put it in our landfill transfer, as opposed to our organics transfer. And so there would be that risk for sure if things weren't being done properly.
So at the material recycling plant,
yep,
we have people that are doing a bit of sorting of the recycling and pulling out the obvious stuff that shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
Would you be thinking you'd have to do that with the organic as well?
We would not entertain sorting through the organic food waste. No. There's a level of grossness that really steps up there. But it obviously is an issue. And so something that an education and promotion program would really need to address with the residents and businesses that are.
Councillor Sandra, did you have a question?
Good. Thank you, Worship. You have a bit of experience with this because we currently have a few organics bins for apples and pumpkins. What sort of contamination rate are you seeing in those bins?
It depends on the year. So this year, for some reason, the pumpkins were perfect. There was I think, 1 bag of garbage and a couple candles. 2 years ago, we had to throw out our load of pumpkins because there was so much garbage in it. And the signage of this is the same, so I'm not.
Well, is there some community awareness that organics is desirable? People are talking about it, it's more...
That could be the change, exactly. There's more awareness, with Calgary having an organics program. And we have had the apple bins out for longer, and so people are getting familiar with that idea of separating the organics there.
And are you seeing contamination in the apple bins as well?
Not garbage, just branches.
Oh, and that's considered to be a contaminant in that?
In that stream, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Go on. Any other questions at the time?
At this time.
Oh, this time? All right.
Well, Councillor Sanford?
Yes.
Thank you again. I know the City of Calgary's program has been quite successful, and one of the things that they do is they have a more accelerated rate of household pickup for organics throughout the summer. I guess they have a winter pickup rate and a summer pickup rate.
Yes.
Has there been any consideration of household pickup of organics on some sort of a schedule, as opposed to a bin pickup in Canmore?
No, there hasn't. And for the reason you look at Squamish has curbside pickup, so your traditional put your organics at the end of the street. They have bear-proof or bear-resistant organics bins that bears get into. And so they are having a big problem in Squamish with bears getting into the organics bins, which are locked, so that the lids degrade or they aren't locked properly. And so they're having a major issue with that.
So that works in Calgary, but it doesn't work in mountain communities that are close to animals? Okay.
Close, specifically bears.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
So if you break down the program, the capital looks like this. So we would look at adding 2 bays to the existing waste management center to give us more capacity for this 2,000 tons of organics. That would be a $1.2 million expense. We would need to put in the transfer equipment, so the trans stores, which together would be $260,000. There would be more staff involved with this, and so we would need to expand the washroom and the change room facility to accommodate that at $250,000. And then we would look to cover all the facilities' power costs. So 100% of the power costs with solar, and that would be an expense of $200,000. We would stay on the grid because we always need power just in case, but it would cover 100% of its power costs. The project would be managed by a contracted project manager at $350,000 over the 2 years. We would need a new collection vehicle for the commercial pickup, so a specialized cart tipping collection vehicle. Then there'd be the collection carts, which we would provide to the businesses, and a promotion education program. Sorry, in the carts would also be household catches for those that are interested in it. And then promotion and education program, so a $20,000 startup with ongoing education in the operating budget in the future. And then the 5 residential containers would be of a $70,000 cost. And one thing I didn't mention was before with the commercial organic program would be a fee for service. So businesses would subscribe to the service and they would pay for essentially the rental of the bin and be charged per pickup for that service. And so eventually that would offset the initial capital costs. And then we would look at hiring 1.5 people to take care of the program.
And the project manager is just your typical, like Elevation Place or somewhere else, there's a person that takes the lead on the project?
Exactly, yes.
outside contract
It's
position?
an outside contract position to do that. Yeah.
Did you have a question, Councillor?
Yeah.
So in terms of the businesses for the fee-for-service piece, do you expect that the cost for them to collect, or for the town to collect organics, will be less expensive than what they're paying for tipping fees for their regular garbage? Is that where the incentive lay for them to actually separate?
Exactly. An exact cost hasn't been landed on, but that would be, you'd want
Is
people...
that what you've seen in other communities?
That's what we'd rather see, that we could price a system that's it's cheaper for them to get rid of their organics separately than to landfill it.
Because otherwise they're not...
There are a few businesses in town that would probably do it because it's the right thing to do, but then we want to make it that everyone wants to, so financially it needs to definitely be the better option.
Perfect, thank you.
And so that's the proposed program. We did look at a few alternatives. These three main ones. So the first one was the in-sink food disposers. Our waste management strategy did recommend us look into that, and in 2017, we did present to council an in-sink disposer report that said we can handle a little bit of increased organic loading at the wastewater treatment plant, but if we were to try to capture 2,000 tons of organics through our wastewater treatment plant, there'd be significant upgrades that would have to happen earlier to the tune of around $11 million. And that wouldn't include some sort of incentive program to help offset people's costs of installing a in-sink disposer unit. So we wouldn't want to do that as our full program. We are not discouraging them, but some people would have to do it on themselves and on a limited scope. The other one would be a basic program, so not going after any of the commercial and just sort of putting out 5 residential bins. This would allow us not to expand the waste transfer station. We could work with Banff. They're willing and interested to take a small amount of material for a short term, just to transfer through them, and then they would transfer it further out east to be processed. And then the third, sorry, go ahead.
So Banff sends all of its organics to the Calgary?
They send all their food waste organics, out of the valley. Exactly. It doesn't work with their lime stabilization process that they use in their biosolids. Yeah.
So the Enviro's only working on...
It works really well with
biosolids. But not the organic.
Yeah. And the third option we looked at was the full build out. So obviously doing the full commercial, but also doing 60 collection containers around town. The risk of that is we could potentially capture 500 more tons of organics if people did it really well, but it would be at a cost of an additional $750,000. So that's why we're saying start with the pilot. If it goes really well, then we can expand from there.
Councillor Mira?
Okay, on the commercial side,
yes.
This is just a question for information. The people in commercial buildings now that have collection from private companies, like Waste Management and that, where do they dump the garbage when it leaves, when they pick it up from your building? Does it go to our transfer station, or where does it go?
It goes to multiple places. So we have one commercial contractor that dumps at our waste management center, but then the rest gets hauled directly to Calgary.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And then, those are the alternatives we looked at, and then we have a little cost summary analysis of what the effects would be to rates. So the top line is the proposed program with a capital cost of $2.7 million. You'll notice in 2019, for all the different scenarios, there's no difference in rate because organics costs wouldn't come into effect until 2020 and 2021. So the proposed rate for 2019 doesn't include any organics, it's just the cost of operating. And then for 2020 and 2021, those are the combined increases. So on your utility bill, you'll see a waste charge and a recycling charge. So this is the increase per year per account with the combined utility rates. So in 2020, there would be an increase of 3.6%, so $14.28 for the year for the combined waste and recycling utility. Does that make sense?
Sounds reasonable.
Yes.
The cost of the program for the ramp up would be $17.68 per account, and then in 2020 it would be $14.28 plus $17.68 for that account, and then in 2021 the accumulation of those three numbers, and that would be the ongoing impact depending on how the model works.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And so 2019 doesn't actually show any organics. So the thought was that we don't want people paying for a program that doesn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so there'd be construction costs that it may be construction beginning, but construction, we wouldn't be paying for it until 2020. And so 2019 doesn't reflect any organics, but the 2020 and 2021 rates do.
So then if I understand, hold on, sorry, 1428 plus. So then the cost would be per account $27.84 in 2021, because you're saying that 2019 isn't actually happening for the program.
Yeah.
I like how you get that divvied out, by the way. That's clever. So for the program, which is the one that you're currently recommending, once the program is fully rolled out, the cost would be $27.84 per account.
An increase per year, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so...
Per year?
Per year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Park, did you have?
That's fine.
And so for the program, we wouldn't be able to capture all the organics with the limited residential, so we're looking at only capturing about 2,000 tons of the potential organics out there. And that would bring us closer to our ESAP goal of 5.3 tons per capita, and with the potential of reducing our greenhouse gas equivalent of 883 tons per year. The basic program, which would just be 5 bins around town, would be a $70,000 increase. You'll see that the rates are actually the same, because there's a couple things that would need to be still happening, like the expansion to the waste management center, the expansion of the washrooms to accommodate more staff, and the solars in there, and those would be reserve funded. And so to keep our reserve balances healthy, we would need to increase the rates the same. We would only be capturing about 400 tons for the year, so having a significant less impact on our ESAP goals and our GHG reduction. And then you can see for the enhanced program, there'd be in 2020 and 2021, just over 5% each year increase in rates. So that's where that costs more for that extra 500 tons, which would bring us that 0.03 closer to our ESAP goals, but it's not hugely significant for the extra expense.
Councillor Sanford.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. In your basic program, there's still a transfer cost or a transfer, you'd have to bring it to the waste transfer station?
No, in the basic program, we would direct haul it to Banff. So they would build some infrastructure to be able to accept outside loads, and we would take it to them at a higher cost.
And there's no option for Banff to pick up our load on their way?
That could be something that we could investigate if we looked at doing something like the basic.
If you set up 5 bins and Banff could pick it up on their haul, on their way to?
Yep, that's something we could look at. Yeah.
Okay.
But it'd be a short term, and it doesn't really solve the problem of organics. They've said they're interested in it for a small amount for a short term.
But wouldn't that be kind of a good test of a pilot, is to start at that level and not invest in a lot of infrastructure, but invest in the concept of piggybacking onto Banff?
I think what's important to highlight is when the town of Banff goes to the city of Calgary area, they're doing it in a large transfer truck. We're going to be collecting these bins from a small 1-ton collection flux, so it still needs to be transferred. The basic program doesn't look at expanding the facility to allow another transfer equipment to do the transfer into the town of Banff's truck as it goes by on its way to Calgary. So we physically wouldn't be able to transfer the contents of what we've collected to the town of Banff's vehicle without expanding the waste management center.
So there has to be a pickup service from the bins to bring it to a larger transfer situation where they can take it to Calgary, because they're not taking it in 1-ton trucks.
That's correct. Okay. They're taking it in larger tractor trailer size trucks.
Oh, okay. So either we take it to their transfer site, or we build our own transfer site, and then it goes into the larger facility? Okay.
That would only work if we only had 5 bins in town for a short time.
For a limited time.
For a little bit of time.
Okay.
And that's why we're proposing the full commercial. If we want to actually make a difference and actually create some diversion, that actually brings us closer to our goal and makes an impact in reducing our carbon footprint, be going after the larger amount of material.
And where do we see the cost to commercial on this? Because we're seeing the household cost here, but where do we see that?
Yeah, the rates for commercial pickup haven't been developed specifically yet. We've have some ranges, but yeah, haven't been developed.
So are you talking about being fully funded on that side by commercial?
The commercial pickup would fund itself.
Okay.
Yes.
So it wouldn't factor into the utility rate?
In the sense that we need to build the infrastructure to put the commercial program in place. Does that make sense? We can't collect 2,000 or 1,500 tons without having somewhere to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to build that waste management center, which is going to take some debt and reserve to happen. Does that make sense?
And so none of that cost would be built into the commercial side?
It would be built into it, eventually paid back.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
Okay,
yes.
Great, thanks.
Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Your Worship. So would it be safe for me to assume that with the recommendation of the program, being that eventually the program will become the enhanced program, that once you put your 5 bins out and you train us all up so that we know what we're meant to put in that bin and what we're not meant to put in that bin, then the reward is more bins?
Exactly, ideally making it more convenient so that more people would
So,
participate.
But with having those 5 bins, it allows us to control what's going on and control whatever contamination is happening and address those missteps in the community when we're all learning how this rolls.
Exactly.
On a more quicker basis, and sort of as opposed to having 60 bins out in the community.
That we're having to deal with all the contamination.
Like organic mayhem. Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect. That's what I thought.
Okay.
Do you have
This is the question section. So yeah, at this point, if there's any more questions, please feel free. Yes. Keep asking them.
You had another question?
No,
I guess not.
I believe it or not.
I think Councillor Comfort has a question.
I do have a question. So at what point would you bring forward an evaluation? After 1 year? Would you have a look at how we did, whether we met our GHG reduction targets?
Yeah, definitely for the first few years, we want to definitely look at how we're doing. Are we creating any diversion? How much are we collecting and sending away? That would definitely be evaluating it. And then we also have in the capital plan, I think in 5 or 6 years out, another waste characterization study to take a deeper dive and see what is in our garbage and if we're actually...
Deeper dive into organic waste. Oh, okay, thank you.
So a question I have is around the commercial side of it. In the report, you note that administration would work with interested food waste generators. So has there been any discussion at this point with the restaurants and hotels in that sector?
Yeah, there is interest. So like we did the waste characterization study when the businesses that participated saw that there was how much organic food waste they produced, they definitely wanted to. And I have had calls from businesses that have changed ownership or there's new staff and they've called us and asked, how do we get rid of organics in Canmore? And I said, not through the town at the moment.
I understand that the logic for commercial operators is they would have a significant reduction in their general waste pickup fees.
Yes, exactly.
So that
by separating
would justify them collecting their organics separately and contributing to this. So how would we, what are the steps to get to the point where we would actually start on this capital project if council approves it during the budget discussions. We wouldn't want to start on that project unless we're certain that we're going to get the buy-in from the commercial sector, because that's about $2 million plus to go to that.
The idea would be to start voluntary and have it as a voluntary program. That's a cost-saving program. The next option would be to potentially make it mandatory, which the City of Calgary has, and they're doing and making it mandatory that all businesses have organic waste diversion programs in their facilities.
So we wouldn't be looking at getting commitments from X number of commercial operators to kick in the project?
At the moment, we haven't. No.
I mean, it's a big step from what you call the basic program to the recommended program,
Yep.
and if we go straight to the recommended program and commercial operations don't sign up, then a bit of a problem.
The other part of this is that Canmore is getting bigger as well, and there's eventually going to need to be expansion at the Waste Management Center, and most of this is taken up with that expansion. So as Canmore builds out to potentially 30,000 people, we're going to need to expand that Waste Management Center regardless. And so that we're doing that now, specifically for organics, but we're going to have to do that eventually. So now we're building capacity ahead of time. We originally built our Waste Management Center with 3 transfer bays with a space for the 4th, and within the second year we installed the 4th. So we're reaching our capacity in our Waste Management Center, and so we do need to either divert that or just increase our capacity in general.
It's a bit of a, if we build it, they'll come sort of a thing. Councillor McCallum?
Not to enter into debate, but if the price point is less expensive for the businesses to actually tip organically, then it's actually not about building it. They will come. It's their pocketbooks are going to decide. Yeah. It's the market will decide for them. So
I think it's pretty likely. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Worship. Increasing the utility rate for this program, we would be hauling a shorter distance if this program were wildly successful. Yes. And organics was diverted from the general waste stream, the household waste stream. Wouldn't we see a drop in the cost of the household waste stream?
And so that is in the model, that there would be a reduction in transfer and hauling
transportation
costs.
Yes. So we would transport to a closer place, save some GHGs and save some money.
GHG, and potentially save a bit of money. We haul a long ways now because it's really cheap.
Right. Yeah. And so that's reflected in the $17 increase. There is an offset there somewhere?
We wouldn't see those savings until further along. Okay. Because the program needs to be able to sustain itself. In the beginning, in 2020, we're not going to see any diversion. 2021, we might see some limited. It'd be in 2022 and 2023 that we would.
So at that point, we can evaluate what's going up, what's going down.
Exactly.
Although we didn't exactly get a lot of savings from recycling versus household waste, right?
There's not a huge business case for it. It's definitely, at the moment, our landfill costs are so cheap, it's cheaper to put things in the garbage. It is.
But the hauling is an expensive part.
The hauling is an expensive part, yes. And so we're reducing the hauling. The processors aren't as cheap as it is to put it in the ground. So
that would be interesting to see how that would play out, as an offset.
And if I could just add one other comment, Councillor Sanford. When we introduced the Beyond Curbside program, we already had a program out there at a couple of depots. So what we did is we made it more convenient and hopefully encourage more people to participate. The big difference here is we don't have an organics program right now, so we are expecting a significant shift. Different than what we did with the Beyond Curbside program and the investment that needs to go with it.
So you have to add more infrastructure, more trucks, more everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that upfront cost is being borne by the utility rate increase to some degree?
Yes, it does need to be initially, so that the residential sector will subsidize the overall commercial and organics program until the program is established and ongoing, and then there'll be a shift where the commercial sector will be paying those costs back, so that we have the right balance between who's paying for what, so we have a more accurate user pay system.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time? So this will be coming, or it's already in the capital budget. We'll be discussing that over the next month and see where council goes with it. Thanks very much for the work you've done. This has been a long time coming. We've certainly been looking forward to this report all year. Great work. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That, I'm going to call a 10-minute break, and then we'll complete the agenda. So, if you're okay with this, I'll call the meeting back to order. Moving on to E1, Councillor Updates. Usual process. Anybody have any questions for anybody else? Now's the time. I have a question for Councillor Sanford. In your report you mentioned, or you note, the 2 SDAB hearings. Can you, those hearings have been held, correct? So what were the results?
Well, the reason I included the link is that you can go to that page and look at what the decisions were. Some of them
go to a link from a paper report.
Oh, okay, well, we all get an electronic version too, right?
Not me. No.
It's an option. I think the best thing to do is to go to the link, because it'll give you the decision and the rationale, plus some of them have not yet, the decision hasn't been released yet, so I don't want to put the decision in here because it's not necessary to, just for timing purposes. So,
okey-doke.
But if you click on the link from the electronic version.
Keep trying it, it's not going anywhere.
And we are being given the SDAB reports from Jolene Noel, who's the SDAB secretary, but this is an easy way to do it if you have an electronic version. And the public can do it too from this report, because it's electronic.
Roger that. Well, I feel properly chagrined then. Chastised, that's the word I meant. So, any other questions for councillors? See none, we'll move on to F1, service area reports. Just, I don't know if it's more of an observation in the General Manager of Municipal Infrastructure's report. In the first bullet, you note CCHC has successfully completed the purchase of 17 units of affordable housing from Mountain Haven Co-op. So do you know, at this point, all of the paperwork's been signed off on and it's a done deal?
Yes, so the sale closed on November 1st and complete with transfer of title. So the remaining work is around the conversion of the co-op to a condominium corporation, and so that work is ongoing, but the CCHC now holds title to those 17 units.
Great, and how long do you think it'll take to complete all of that work?
The conversion we still anticipate will take us at least until the spring, so another 6 months approximately to complete that work. And yes, 6 months.
Okay, and prior to that conversion thing, life can go back to normal for the owners and residents? Yeah, so from the owners, the other co-op members who are owners of their units perspective, this is positive. In that the reserve fund is now funded and the conversion is in process. Once that process is complete, they will be able to treat their property like any other CCHC PAH property. For those who were members but who were renters, they have signed rental agreements with CCHC and will be allowed to continue in their homes for that period of time. Great news, thank you. Are there any other questions related to the Section A, the CAO's office, or Section B, municipal services? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Worship. I had a question about the community grants. It says that only one community grant was allocated in this round. What happens to the rest of the fund from that then?
Thank you. So this was just for the event grant, not for all the grants, right? So all the remaining monies will just go back into the Economic Development Reserve. That's what funds that grant, so it will just go right back there.
Okay,
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions in that section? Section C, corporate services. Or Section D, municipal infrastructure. Just follow-up question for Mr. Fark from the agenda review about the Palliser Trail pedestrian connectivity, the crosswalk. Do you know if that's been accomplished?
So a temporary crossing is now in place, and they are working on additional infrastructure that will go in shortly. But yes, it has been resolved.
Great, thanks very much. Any other questions from council in regards to the service area reports? Seeing none, I'll move on. Oh, okay, Councillor Stanford.
I'm not sure if anybody can answer this, but under finance, there's a supplementary assessment. They mailed 85 homeowners at the end of October. When does the financial impact of that actually hit our budget from the supplementary assessments? Any idea?
Oh.
So we've mailed out the supplementary assessments to 85 homeowners. That means that there's likely to be an increase because those projects have been finished?
Yes, so every year we budget for supplemental assessment revenue. I believe it's about $25,000 in this year's budget. So,
but there's 85 of them, so that sounds like a significant number this year compared to previous years.
Yes, it is being used to factor into our calculations for new tax growth next year. Okay. So that's the number, yes. So we have
the number for next year.
Well, those 85 properties will be fully taxed in 2019, and we've used that to calculate the new tax growth number that we were sharing with the Finance Committee.
But the supplementary assessment would impact 2018 budget as well, wouldn't it?
Yes, yes. So if we collect more taxes this year than expected, it will be part of our surplus.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of council on service area reports? Seeing none. The council resolution action list. Are there any questions for the monthly bulletin from Bow Valley Regional Housing? Seeing none, I'll move the committee of the whole go in camera. Those in favor? Opposed? We're in camera. Adjourn. Okay, we're done.